Okay, Ian, you can take it away.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the April 15th meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. It was first live by Zoom or video. This meeting is being held electronically to comply with the governor's stay-at-home order. To ensure the safety of all our residents and our staff, I want to thank our staff in particular for all the hard work they've done scrambling to figure something out that wasn't in anyone's vision very long ago to make this work. Thank you again to the staff of the City of Edina. All members of the Planning Commission, all staff, all presenters are participating from their homes or offices instead of at the City Hall. Before we begin, because of the unique nature of tonight's meeting, a few things I'd like to cover for people listening in and people who want to participate in portions of the meeting. The City of Edina is committed to continuing to receive and hear input on matters. We have been collecting public input for this meeting and for other meetings through voicemail on our engagement website, which is called bettertogetheredina.org. It is important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to this meeting. We've also received, I think, one voice message about tonight's meeting, matters on tonight's meeting. You do not need to submit the feedback, however, in any other way. All feedback is considered equally, regardless of the way in which it was submitted. Tonight we have several public hearings, and we'll get to those in just a moment. Individuals who want to provide testimony for a public hearing can do by calling 1-800-374-0221 and entering conference ID 5555-207. That's a 7-digit number with 4 5s and then 207. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff liaison Carrie Teague will time the speakers and let you know when you've hit your 3 minutes. Remember, you do not need to call tonight if you've already provided feedback. Also, when you do call, anyone who does participate in the feedback sessions of tonight's meeting, we ask that you not repeat something that another speaker has already provided, just for the economy of time. We do listen to the points. So call in if you have any new comments or information that you want to present to our attention. And again, thanks to everyone in advance for your patience as we work through everything tonight to conduct this meeting using our online systems, and many people using different types of software and systems. We have, oh boy, more than 20 people participating from their own homes. We hope there will not be any issues. We do expect that we're going to learn something as we go along. We also hope we don't have to do this too many times. But be assured that we're working through things and we'll do our best to continue the meeting as best we can if there are any glitches. So with that said, I'd like to begin the meeting and begin our agenda. All members of the Planning Commission have received the information, and so we're calling the meeting to order. And I believe, Ms. Olson, do you want to do roll call, or are you good with that?
Thank you, Chair Nemerov. I will do roll call. Commissioner Douglas.
Present.
Commissioner Agnew.
Present.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here. Sorry.
Commissioner Melton.
Here.
Commissioner Veluvali. Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Thorson.
Present.
Commissioner Berube.
Here.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Chair Nemerov.
Here, thank you. Well, that is a quorum, definitely a quorum. The next item on our agenda is simply to approve the agenda itself. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda as submitted.
Second.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Liz, do we need to do this by, for this one, let's just do it by voice instead of having to do roll. Is that okay? All in favor, say aye.
Chair
Any
Nemerov,
opposed?
you do need to do a roll call for every single vote.
Okay, all right. Liz, would you please?
Absolutely. I have Commissioner Thorson as first motion and Commissioner Bennett as the second. So to approve, I'm calling on Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. Thank you. Well, that motion passes. The next item on our agenda tonight is approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting on March 11, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Does anyone have any changes?
I move approval of the minutes as submitted.
I second that.
Motion and second. Any further commentary? Ms. Olson, please.
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. Thank you. So that takes us to our public hearings. We have 5 public hearings tonight. And so how this will work is staff will make a presentation, as it does normally. Staff will make a presentation, and the applicants will have opportunities to speak to us, and we can ask questions of staff, we can ask questions of the applicants, and then we'll open it up for a public hearing. One thing that we're all going to learn, that we may learn tonight, is that there is a delay in the public hearing. So, as people to speak. So, we may wait a short time after each public hearing to move on to the next matter, just to make sure that we've heard everything and allowed everyone the opportunity to speak. So, with that, our first matter is Ms. Acker is going to be speaking on a 25-foot front yard setback variance for 513 John Street.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Are you waiting for the architect to speak on this?
No.
Okay.
So the subject property is located at 316 John Street. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my PowerPoint. It is a 12,422 square foot in area property. Are you able to see this current?
No.
Emails, we don't see the typical PowerPoint display there.
Okay. Okay, stop and then I'll.
You click in a meeting with everyone's faces again, and then this button.
Okay. Sorry, again, I got it. Thank you for your patience. Do you see it? Okay. Subject property is located at 513 John Street. It is located just south of John Street. It consists of a 3-story home. The project is for a 5-foot side yard setback, a 25-foot front yard setback, and a variance for definition of a basement counted as a story. This is the existing footprint and survey of the property, and highlighted in yellow is the setback area. The entire house is outside of the required setback. They're hoping to add on to the back of the home. That would be the phase 1 would be on the basement level, and then they wanted to show the entire project, so they will be also adding on to the garage on the main floor and then also above the garage. So these are the existing floor plans of the property. That was the lower level, the main floor, and then the second floor, the current home as it faces John Street. This would be the north elevation, and then the easterly elevation, the rear elevation, and the westerly elevation. The proposal is to add onto the basement area towards the back as a phase 1 project, and then phase 2, they wanted to make sure that they represented the entire project, although their intention is to work on that addition off the back as the phase 1 portion of it. They would be adding to the garage area eventually, but currently they're requesting a variance to add on to the back, which wouldn't really change the front elevation look. The rear elevation, it would be a 1-story addition off the back with a flat roof, and then eventually they would be adding on to the garage area, which requires the front yard setback variance, and then an addition above the garage, which would require the side yard setback variance, and then an addition off the back above that basement level addition. Because the existing house is non-conforming on the side as well as the front, and then that lower level is considered a story because more than 50% of the exterior wall area is exposed. They do require 3 variances for the total build out of this project. This then would be the ultimate build out of the back, and then the side view. The finished project that they're proposing for phase 1 actually won't change the look of the front of the house as it exists today. And then the addition above the garage would be the eventual phase 2 addition. So the proposed use is permitted in a single dwelling unit district. It complies with all the zoning standards, with the exception of the fact that virtually the entire structure is non-conforming. So any addition to the home would require a variance for setback, and then also the basement rule. Staff does recommend approving the 5-foot side, 25-foot rear yard setback variance, and the definition of a basement counted as a story, subject to the survey and plans date stamped March 3rd, 2020, and compliance with the conditions and comments listed in the environmental engineer's memo. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Do any members of the planning commission have questions? Please speak up if I'm not seeing you, but I'm not seeing any. So with that, with the app, are there any? Just one more. Okay, thanks. Would the applicant like to speak?
I'm representing the applicant. My name is Greg Gratton. I'm the architect on the project. And my company name is Mainly Details with Visual Design. I think that it was summarized pretty well. I don't think that I need to add too many other comments other than to say, if you need to know any additional information that, she didn't talk about, that's fine. We can talk about that. I've got square footages, that kind of thing, if that's of interest. Other than that, I think it was represented pretty well. I think the overall character, especially you can see on the front of the house, by adding a story over the garage, it's pretty commonplace. We're not asking for anything unusual there. The real hardship gets to be in this project is that the entire structure is, outside the building setback requirements. So it's it's a unique kind of a project. I have never ran into one like this in my years. But I think that what they're proposing though is in character, and it will enhance the value of the neighborhood and the lot itself, the value of the land. So I think it's a pretty good project. Well, I could talk a little bit about phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 and phase 2 is, yes, isolated pretty much to the lower level. And part of what we're doing there too is anticipating the phase 2 construction. And it might be problematic to do phase 2 without doing full foundation work as part of phase 1, to take into consideration phase 2. So that's where we're at on it. I think it was described pretty well.
Very much, Mr. Gardner. Do any members of the Planning Commission have any questions for Mr. Gardner? Okay. Thanks. Well, this is now we get to the traditional. This is a public hearing. Any public hearings, any member of the public that wishes to speak about this matter can speak. I'll repeat the dial-in number. If you'd like to call in, the number is 1-800-874-0221, and it's conference ID 5555207. So I'd like to just give a moment to see if anyone is calling in. I'll put you in a queue. Staff will manage you through the minutes and we'll let you know when you're. Thank you. Are there any other calls in the queue?
At this time, there are no comments on the queue.
Okay. Thank you. Can a question? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay. Good. With that said, so that concludes this public hearing. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Jennifer, do we need to do a roll vote for closing the public hearing?
Sure.
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. That brings the matter back to the Planning Commission. Does anyone have any comments they wish to make about this matter?
This is Commissioner Agnew. Did we get any other feedback from any of the neighbors on either side, either in support of this or in opposition? I didn't see any, but just want to validate, other than the neighbor that just spoke.
Chris, I didn't see anything better together. Is there anything?
We did not receive any correspondence, although neighbors within 200 feet were notified.
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
I have a quick question for Chris. Just to clarify, the variance regarding the basement, the maximum is 2.5 stories, and this would essentially be 3 stories because half of the basement will be exposed. So I guess I'm just wondering, from the front, it'll be within compliance. It'll only be when you look at it from the back. Is that correct?
Correct. It's already non-compliant. Most of the basement is already exposed. So no matter what they do, they're still in the same situation.
Okay. And it looked like from the picture that the house is very close to what I'm assuming is the house to the southwest.
Yes,
and that's where we're requesting a greater variance. Is that correct?
the greatest variance is from the front lot line and then
Okay.
From the west as well, but they're not increasing the footprint in either of those directions. It's to the south in the backyard.
Okay. So for both of the neighbors on either side, the footprint does not increase at all.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sheila, do you have anything else? Sheila, do you have anything else? Any other commissioners have questions or comments? Chris, could you just address this construction? I mean, we've had lots of projects working with new construction. People have always been able to get stuff in. Is this something that the city? Is this something that's a concern? Or?
Oh, in terms of road construction?
Yeah.
We don't limit when people can do construction projects on their home based on other projects that the city is conducting.
Are there any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the variance, subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
And I will second that.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Olson, would you do a roll call?
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you very much to everyone. So that concludes that matter. We can go to our second public hearing tonight, which is at variances for 4505 West 70th Street, an existing home. Now to be presented again by Chris Alford. Chris, over to you.
Sorry. What's it doing? Oh, stop that. Stop it again.
Okay.
Go back to this. Sorry. Okay.
Exactly. Here.
Mm-hmm.
How come it's not going up there? I believe so. So the subject property is a 19.2 foot front yard setback variance for a tear down rebuild for a new home to be built at the same non-conforming front yard setback as the existing home for property at 4505 70th Street West. The subject property is located north of 70th. It consists of a rambler currently. It will be a tear down rebuild. It will be replaced with a 2-story home. The proposal is to maintain the existing non-conforming setback that you see here of 39.7 feet. The homes on either side are corner lots, with the home to the east facing Wooddale. So their side street is along 70th Street, and the home to the west fronts 70th Street and Creston Road. It does address off of 70th Street. This home was built in prior to the home that's to the west or to the east, and is at a deeper setback. And once this home is removed, the existing home, then the front yard setback is established by the house that's to the west, the 58.9 foot setback. What you'll notice is that they have a longer side lot line into the right of way. So there's about 7 feet of additional lot on the lot to the west that the subject lot does not have. There's a deeper right of way, so they're already further back based upon where the front lot line is occurring. So this is a 2-story home that will be located in the same location as the previous home. It will line up with the home to the east. Here's the proposed basement floor plan, main floor plan, and second floor. The second floor will actually be on the eastern portion of the house, with the garage area that's a 1-story portion of the home that will be adjacent to that house that's to the west that actually is dictating the front yard setback. It will be a 2-story home with a 3-car garage. And this is what it would look like in context with the homes on either side. There's going to be a driveway between the existing driveway of the neighbor's property between the subject property and the home to the west. So based on the fact that it is the proposed use is permitted and complies with all the zoning ordinances, the proposed new home is reasonable due to the existing home's non-conforming setback. The home will be rebuilt with the existing proposed front yard setback that's been in place since the original construction in the 1960s. The house was built many years ago prior to our current ordinance requirements. It does comply with all of the other ordinance requirements. Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The new home will match the existing home's front yard setback that's been in place and that did not require a variance for original construction. Staff does recommend approval of the 19.2 foot South Street setback request for tear down rebuild for property located at 4504 West 70th Street, subject to the survey and plans date stamped March 9th, 2020, and compliance with the conditions and comments listed in the engineering report. We did hear from the neighbor that is adjacent to the west, and that was a voicemail message in support of the request. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Any planning commissioners have questions from Ms. Ocker?
This is Commissioner Agnew. One clarification. I noted that the address of the gentleman who called in support was 4515 West 70th Street, which I believe is across the street. Can you verify the location?
You are correct. I stand corrected.
Did we hear from any of the other neighbors then?
We did not. And
Okay,
again, we do send out we send out notices within 200 feet of the subject property. So they have been notified.
Any other commissioners have questions? Chris, I had one. So can you bring up that last image again? Yeah, just to confirm for maybe me and everyone else, the south setback, that's where the garage is?
The south setback is the entire front of the home?
Front. Okay. So where the garage is, it complies with our current setback requirements. Is that correct?
No, it does not. It's going to be placed in the existing non-conforming front yard setback.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking, I'm looking at the compliance table on page 2 of the packet. It says north side, it meets the city standard. East side, it meets the city standard. And west side, it meets the city standard. It's just the south side where it doesn't. And I just wanted to confirm which face of the house is the non-conforming side.
It would be that would be the south side.
Is that the front of the house or the?
Correct.
Front? So the side where the garage is between the garage and the neighbor's house, that's a conforming setback.
Oh, I'm sorry. The side yard setback between the two, absolutely.
That's conforming. Okay.
Correct.
Thank
It's
you.
conforming in every way except the front yard setback.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, with that, I believe Rebecca Ryan is here to speak on behalf of the applicant. You're on mute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for working in this alternative format. I appreciate your time in doing this so that we can still have the meeting. I do want to give a special thank you to Chris because I had a lot of questions and she was always accessible and very patient in answering all my questions and getting everything put together. So I really did appreciate her extra time. There's not really a lot to add as far as documentation or anything like that. The one thing I would say is that I have an excellent relationship with all of my neighbors, both my side neighbors and the ones across the street. I shared my plans with them prior to submitting the variance. Everybody's on board. One happens to be out of town during this quarantine time at their cabin. And the other one called me this morning and asked if they needed to call in. And I said I didn't think it was necessary, but I just want you to know that the two neighbors that are directly adjacent to me are on board as well. I would also just go on to say that I've lived in Edina for 21 years. I've raised 2 children here. I've been very invested in this community and want to continue to invest in this community. I love Edina. I love the location. I love the amenities. This is just a great place to be, and I've lived all over the country, and I love Minnesota, and I love Edina. So I really hope that you guys give me the variance that I'm requesting to build this home. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Any of the commissioners have questions? Now, one thing I just wanted to toss out to the commissioners is a couple of you have raised your hand visually on screen. Well, that actually works. So okay. I don't see any questions. With that, then we can go to a public hearing. And again, as we said, if people haven't heard, you call in. I'll give that number again. With me, I'm going to a few different screens here. The phone number is 1-800-374-0221, and the 7-digit conference ID is 5555207. I have up to 3 minutes. So we'll take a moment with the callers to call in. It's like giving away concert tickets in 1982.
Just a reminder, though, please press *1 to speak once you are successfully connected to the conference. And we do have a caller, so operator, will you please put her through?
All right. Kelly McLennan, please state your name and where you are from. Kelly
McLennan, are you on the call?
We still have that caller. I know, it reminds me of Fraser.
She's not responding.
Okay, do we have any other callers? That person can call back again if they need to. Are there any other callers?
None as of the moment.
Why don't we give just a moment to see if the person calls back.
Okay, she's back. All right, Kelly McLennan, your line is open.
Yes, I apologize. That actually wasn't here, and I did not mean to make that comment. However, I do wonder what is the impact on the neighbors' homes with a house being built like this.
No. Thank you. Are there any other callers? Any other comments from the public on this one?
We have another caller, but I'm not sure. She hasn't pressed the button to ask or to comment.
What was it? *1 that they have to do, or #1, which is it?
It's *1, Chair Nemerov.
Okay. Should we move forward?
We still have no callers who would like to comment. Please go ahead.
Okay. We have a motion to close the public hearing and bring it up to the planning commission for discussion. Give me one.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, but just to confirm, we'll address the caller's question once we close the public hearing. Is that correct?
I'll ask that.
I second the motion then.
Motion in a second. Could we get a resolution? Could you roll vote?
Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. And that brings up to the planning commission. I guess I'll toss that that resident's question over to the applicants and to staff to see if they have any thoughts about it.
I didn't hear the entire question.
Was it about a window? Sheila?
I thought she was just asking what the impact might be for houses in the neighborhood.
I'm not sure the intent of the question. The house to the left is a 2-story house. The house behind me is a 2-story house. There's a brand new construction 2-story house diagonal from me and a block away from me. So many of the houses are going from ramblers to 2 stories. So I don't know if that's what she is referring to, but.
Well, in the past, it seemed, the response to these questions are it's somewhat hypothetical because you don't know how it will change the value. And we're not really determining this based on valuations. It's whether it's in compliance or not. And if it's not in compliance, are we willing to make a variance or, agree to the variance request? But it's not so much about valuation is my understanding, but I would love to hear staff's perspective.
I would agree with that comment. In terms of how would it just affect the neighborhood in general, the request is to put the house in the same spot that it is currently, and it does comply in all other ways. So it does meet the other requirements and will be in the same spot that it has been since the original house was built.
Is there any other opportunity for the planning commission to discuss this matter? Sheila, for example, do you have any other comments on this or on that issue or any other issues related to the? I don't want to cut you off. Okay, do any other planning commissioners have anything they'd like to discuss about this?
This is Joanne. Do we have to roll call to close the public hearing, or did we do that? Did I miss that? We did that. Did we? Okay.
Are there any other comments about the matter itself? Questions, further questions, motions?
I'll move approval of the variance subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is second. Are there any again, one final call for conversation? Speaking now. Hey, well, then, Liz, please, if you could do the roll.
Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. So then it passes. Thank you, everyone, for that one. That concludes that matter. Carrie, does that go to the council, or does that Does that conclude the application of the city?
That was a final action on a variance request. That will not go to the city council.
Okay. Then we go to our third public hearing tonight, which is a 170.1 foot setback variance for what's called a monopole antenna and a light standard. I believe it's Highlands Park. With that, trying to go 3 for 3 is Assistant City Planner Chris Rocker.
Thank you. The reason why it doesn't come up now. This does not come up. So this is a 170.1 foot setback variance for a monopole cellular communications antenna tower and light standard replacement to provide cellular service co-location for Crown Castle USA Inc. This is located at 5200 Doncaster Way in Highlands Park. Subject property is a city park. It consists of fields and a park building, a hockey rink, a parking lot. This is a survey of the existing conditions in a site detail. This is where the current monopole light standard is located. It will be replaced. Currently, the light standard and pole is 58.1 feet. It's located just southeast of the ice rink and northwest of the park building. The existing light standard and antenna will be replaced in the same location with a 75-foot tall monopole to accommodate new ice rink lights, a relocation of the T-Mobile array, and then the addition of Verizon cellular service antenna. It will also include a bituminous walk, and this would be just northwest of the park building, and with all of the utility that's needed for that located in this area. So on this side, on the right side, is the existing pole and light standard. The replacement will be increased in height to 75 feet. The required setback, given the 75-foot height, is 300 feet from any property adjacent that is zoned residential. So the proposed setback that, well, actually it's the current setback, is 129 feet from a lot line that is zoned residential. So therefore, a 170.1 foot setback variance is needed. The antenna ordinance does require that any pole that is 75 feet in height or greater accommodate co-location, which is what they're proposing to do with the Verizon antenna added onto the T-Mobile and then also the light standards. There's no other location that they could find within a mile radius in order to accommodate the co-location of the Verizon apparatus. And then they did redesign the pole and also the equipment on the pole to be more stealth. The original proposal had been larger and a little less obtrusive, or a little more obtrusive. They've come back with a sleeker style with the pole arrangement. So is the proposed setback variance reasonable? Staff does believe the proposed variance is reasonable, given that The proposed monopole will accommodate co-location. It'll be located in the same location as the existing light standard and pole that's there currently. Staff does support the request subject to the following conditions. The plans and survey that are date stamped March 11th, 2020, the grading plan, and also the memos from both the engineering department, and then the Park and Rec director also submitted a memo. They would like to review the path to the equipment area, and then also looking at the tree removal. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Yes. Many members of the planning commission are assisting planner on.
I have a question regarding the required setback for the monopoles. Is that based purely on aesthetics, or is there any health considerations included in that?
When the ordinance was originally written, it was all based upon distance from residential property based on, I believe, how it looked. There wasn't the ordinance has been in place for many years, and I don't know if it ever addressed any of the issues that you were referring to.
Okay. The reason I ask is because there is some concern from some people regarding potential health issues with 5G and other technology. And I wonder if there was any kind of statement from any of the city engineers regarding potential health issues and whether distance makes a significant difference.
There wasn't. Engineering did supply a memo, but there wasn't any comments regarding it.
So that wasn't part of the discussion at all?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Staff. Commissioner Adams.
Can you review the business purpose for having the Verizon antenna located here?
The business purpose?
Yeah, like there are cell issues nearby that people are asking for this tower to be here.
My understanding is that they have it's a sort of a drop zone. Verizon doesn't have good coverage in this area. Perhaps the applicant could address that a little better than I could.
Okay. Does anyone else have any? Commissioner, I can give anything further. Want to hold that for the applicant? Anyone else? I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak a little louder. I'm getting a little bit of side feedback that people say I'm a little hard to hear. I've gotten that from more than one of you. So anyone else, just let me know. But I have a question for you, Chris, and that's to follow up on the Parks and Recreation memo regarding trees. And that'll probably be a question for the applicant too. One of the things I read in the Parks and Rec memo is it seemed that they were concerned about loss of trees. Is that a risk in this matter? If it is, how does the city's tree ordinance apply to something like this?
The tree ordinance would apply to any project. So, but I know that the Park and Rec director and the city forester are going to be looking at any sort of tree removal as it relates to this project before it occurs.
Okay, well maybe we can ask for the applicant. Does anyone else have any questions for staff? With that said, we can bring up the applicant. We do have a representative of Crown Castle with us tonight, or are you on the line? Maybe it's Megan Flower.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Megan Flower. I'm with Crown Castle. I just wanted to take a quick moment at first and thank Chris for all of her help with us getting to a good resolution that we seem to all agree on. I do have a small PowerPoint that I would like to show, if that's okay.
Will you make that work?
Let me know if you guys can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is a PowerPoint on the tower replacement we are proposing the variance request for. The first page just kind of gives you a little detail on who we are as a company. Safety is always extremely important to us. We are open 24/7 with any questions through our Network Operations Center. We monitor critical systems. We respond to network outages. And we have calls that are answered by live representatives 24 hours a day, 7 days a week out of Pittsburgh. Our next slide goes into why this site is important. Currently, we have 96% of Americans own a cell phone and 81% are smartphones. There's an 82% increase in mobile data growth from 2018 to 2019. And there's over an 80% of all 911 calls originate from the wireless devices. So our next slide goes into a little more of the project description. What we're looking to do is replace the current tower we have in the same area with a 15-foot taller one to accommodate Verizon. Like it was mentioned earlier, Verizon currently has dropped coverage here, and they've been looking for ways that they can get coverage to their customers in this area. And the least intrusive way that we were able to come up with this was to add to the tower that we currently have. And unfortunately, once we ran our structural, it showed us that the current tower could not hold the loading from Verizon, so we had to replace it with a newer tower. The current ordinance requires a setback from the nearest residential property line to be 4 times the height of the tower, which would be 300 feet. The closest residential line that we have will be 129.11 feet from the nearest residential line. So this page, you can see there's a map on your right. And basically the important thing to know about this map is this is the coverage capacity that Verizon will have with future coverage once they co-locate on the new tower. Red is the best kind of service they can provide, and blue is the worst. So you can see right where the green dot is, this is where the tower will be, and it shows you that Verizon will now have coverage there. The new tower will also accommodate a light standard for the ice rink, which we currently have on the old tower as well. And again, this is the least intrusive means of providing coverage for Verizon. The next slide just goes into why the variance permit is necessary. And some things to take note on this is, again, the significant gap in service coverage that Verizon's going through right now and seeking to co-locate their equipment on this tower in order to meet the community's network demands. This tower replacement is needed in order to co-locate the additional carrier. Again, the tower that we currently have there will not be able to take on the additional loading for the new Verizon equipment. This is the quickest and least intrusive means to place a multi-carrier capable tower as close to the old tower as possible. And staff has agreed that this variance request meets all the criteria of granting a variance contained in the city's ordinance. The next slide is just another picture. Chris showed it as well of the site plan. So again, this is where the tower is. The new tower will go right next to it. This slide shows you what the tower currently looks like, and then it also shows you the photo sims that we had created that will show what the new tower will look like. So you'll see the light, T-Mobile, and then Verizon at the top. Last slide just shows the details of Verizon's equipment. You guys saw this first one on the presentation that Chris gave as well. And that is it. So I want to thank you for your time, and if there's any questions that I can answer, I will be more than happy to. And if there's anything I can't answer, I'll be more than happy to get back to you as soon as possible with them.
Ms. Flower. Do any members of the planning commission have any questions for the applicant? Or a few questions over that would be well addressed?
This is Commissioner Agnew. I'd had the question about the business purpose of this, and it seems I just jumped the gun on the question. I feel like you answered that quite well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. I just want to clarify. I might have misunderstood, or maybe there's a bit of a discrepancy. Megan, I believe you said that it's 129 feet from the nearest residential. Is that right? Because
Yes,
staff
ma'am.
said, I think staff said 170.
We're asking for a 170-foot variance because it's currently
That's the difference.
129. Yep.
I get it. Thank you very much. Got it.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? I had two, just follow-ups from earlier. One is, it was asked about the health effects of these matters. Do you have any comments on what's known about health effects from these towers?
I do not have any comments on that. I don't believe that's something that federal law puts into place is the health, but I'm not sure on that.
In the trees, will there be any trees that are damaged or removed as a result of this project?
I will have to look at a detailed site plan. I know that we've been going back and forth with Chris on the site plan to make sure that everybody's in agreement with it.
Are there any further questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I have a question.
Good.
So from the images you showed, it looks like the Verizon structure is going to be significantly larger than the existing T-Mobile one. Is that correct? The
As
antennas?
far as the antennas,
Yeah.
yes, they will be bigger.
Okay. So maybe this is a question for the city, but partly for you. Is that have anything to do with the technology? Like, would 5G be a bigger antenna than a non-5G?
I'm not sure on their specific antenna specifications. I can see if it's in. Yes, I'm not sure what connection they're putting in off of these plans.
Okay.
But it seems like with the carriers, their antennas are starting to get a little bit bigger and bigger with their upgrades.
Okay, so, and I guess this is as much a question for the city. So if we approve this variance, then it's for the structure itself, and so presumably they can modify the antennas in any way they want in the future. We're just saying how tall it can be and how far away from the lot line.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners have questions? We'll have an opportunity for further discussion. With that said, I guess we can go to a public hearing. And again, to participate in the public hearing, if you have the number memorized, but it's 1-800-374-0221. And then the conference ID is 5555207. And I remember you have to press *1 to be placed into the queue. And you'll have 3 minutes. And I said, well, wait a minute, let the lines load. Not giving away tickets. There are no shows to go to. Staff, are we getting any callers or should we wait a moment?
does not appear that we have any callers for this public hearing at this point.
I'll wait to see another few moments. Anything? You're still on empty call-in numbers?
That's correct.
All right. So why don't we the motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
3 seconds and a motion. Okay. Ms. Olson, could you do a roll, please?
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. That closes the public hearing, which brings it back up to the Planning Commission. Does anyone on the Planning Commission have any further comments or questions they'd like to ask at this time?
I have a question for staff. So if I remember correctly, at the last city council meeting, council member Brindle requested that a discussion about 5G be postponed or taken off the agenda because of concerns about, or at least some uncertainties about health issues regarding 5G. And first, I guess my question is, am I remembering that correctly?
I can take that. This is Carrie. They did have a discussion. It doesn't relate to this project. It's in regard to 5G technology that's being installed across the city.
Mm-hmm.
But so it was discussed at the last city council meeting.
So I'm not remembering that correctly. It wasn't taken off the agenda because there was uncertainty about the health issues.
There were some questions about it that they'd like to explore a little further.
Okay. Thank you.
Sheila, anything further?
No, I do have a comment. If we're done with questions, I'll just make a comment if we're onto that phase. So my comment is the community benefit of having better cell service is, in my mind, really significant. I think there are some unknowns about the 5G. I'm not myself particularly concerned with that. And I guess what makes me comfortable with moving forward with something like this is that I believe that if healthcare concerns arose, you could immediately stop transmission. So it would be, it doesn't, if we approve it, as soon as we know, or if we ever did find out that there were some health issues, it isn't like if we approve it now, then forever we'll have a health issue because you can immediately stop those transmissions. So I guess I'd be a proponent of going forward because the benefits of having cell coverage is, in my mind, pretty significant. And it appears that no neighbors are opposed to it. From the pictures, it's a pretty significant visual difference, but the neighbors have had a chance to speak. And if it's needed in order to have coverage, then I guess that's how it works.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have comments or questions on this matter? Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, just a comment. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful project, right? Just kidding. However, I mean, this is part of the world we live in right now. It's kind of the necessary visual disturbance that we need to function as a society currently. And where I don't have reservations is the fact that there is a tower that's right there already. That precedent of its location is already set. So heightening it, I think, people won't be surprised or upset that that happened. They would expect it, especially the neighbors who probably are experiencing bad service, and now this is helping them. So, I mean, does it disrupt the character of the neighborhood? Certainly, but I don't think it's enough to turn this down. That's just my feeling.
Thanks, Jimmy. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Anyone have a vote?
I'll move approval of the variance subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memos.
For a second.
I second.
Sorry?
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Does anyone else have any comments on this? All right. Ms. Olson, could you do a roll, please?
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. It passes. Planner Rocker or Planner Teague, what's the future for this motion, for this matter?
This is a final action also, so this will not move forward for City Council. They can proceed for building permit.
Thank you very much. Good luck. That takes us to our fourth public hearing matter of the evening, and that is a side yard setback at 5908 Chowan Avenue. And speaking is planner Emily Boddicker.
Okay. Um, 5908 Chowan Avenue is approximately 0.2 acres and is located on the east side of Chowan between 58th Street and 60th Street. The existing home on the lot is a single-story, single-family home that was built in 1953. The applicant is requesting a 2.8-foot side yard setback variance to accommodate a garage addition off of the existing single-stall garage on the south side of the existing house. The project also includes a new second-story addition. With the exception of the south side yard setback, the proposed garage addition and the second floor addition meet all other zoning requirements. The subject property drains to Chowan Avenue, and the applicant proposes to grade a swale along the south property line to maintain that drainage towards Chowan. There is floodplain on the subject property, so the engineering department has provided two separate memos. One is a site-specific review to address those floodplain concerns and the requirements for the garage addition concerning the floodplain and elevations. The practical difficulty is designing for the existing home in its present location on the lot. The single-family home is a permitted use in the zoning district and complies with zoning standards, with the exception of the south side yard setback. The proposed addition is for a second garage stall, which would be required if they were to build a new home in this location. And like I said, the proposed second-story addition meets all of the setback requirements. The placement of the existing home is not self-created, and the applicant is trying to improve the existing structure instead of tearing down and rebuilding. And staff believes that granting the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood. There are other homes in the neighborhood that have two-car garages, and there are properties in the area with existing non-conforming setbacks. So tonight, staff's recommendation is to approve a 2.8-foot side yard setback variance at 5908 Chowan Avenue, subject to the findings and conditions listed in your staff report.
Thanks. Any questions for Assistant City Planner Boddicker? Anyone? Just speak up. I can't really see everyone the way my screen is laid out right now. Okay, I have one, Emily, and that is if you can just confirm that the setback is the setback variance is where the garage is going and where the slopes up to the second story. Is that correct?
It's for the new garage addition on the first floor of the home. The second floor of the home is all conforming to the zoning requirements, so it meets all of the required setbacks. It's just the garage addition on the first floor.
Okay, and so it's a setback between the garage and the neighbor to the south.
Correct.
Do you know the setback, the neighbor to the south yard on facing this house?
I don't offhand. Let me see. I can pull up the aerial again, just to get a visual representation. I do not have that distance unless here I can survey. It doesn't look like they have the neighbor's setback shown.
It is listed as 5.8 feet on the survey.
Oh, okay. Oh, right here.
Oh, and then Emily, on the north side, is a variance needed for the north side also? Or?
No, there's an existing non-conforming setback on the first floor, but the second floor does meet the required setback. So they took the second floor and pulled it back so it meets the setback requirements.
Well, can you show that visually again?
Yep. So you can see here on the survey that there is a non-conforming setback on the north side. But you can see here in the elevation that the applicant has pulled that second floor back and it meets this required 8-foot setback. So here on the first floor is where they have a non-conforming setback. They pulled the second floor back so it meets the 8-foot setback requirement.
So this house will end up having 2 setbacks between it and its neighbors of less than 6 feet.
Yes.
Can a new house be built? I mean, I think we have some kind of, don't we have some kind of additive formula?
Yep, if there was a non-conforming setback on the first floor, if they were to add on to that non-conforming setback, they could add on an equal amount up to 200 square feet.
And also get this south setback.
Yes. If the variance is approved tonight.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else have any other questions for staff? All right. Well, that's it. We have a representative of the applicants here tonight. This is your chance.
I think it was covered pretty well by Emily leading into it, but I do want to just mention again that in the stormwater management plan, we have taken into consideration drainage for the house to actually improve upon what we have currently at that location. So we did definitely take that into consideration. And also the gutter location and downspout location will be improved upon what we have now. And we definitely have taken all of that into consideration when designing the house and doing the grading as well.
I'm sorry, I should have dumped in a more formal beginning. Is Is this Neil Thiessen?
Tyson, yes.
Tyson, okay, thanks. Are you the applicant itself? Are you representing the applicant?
I am representing the applicant. I'm the proposed builder of the project.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Tyson? Well, hold on. And I said, well, we do again have, this is an open meeting, a public hearing, and any member of the public that wishes to speak, this is the chance. The number to call in again is 1-800-374-0221. Conference ID 5555207. Press *1. You're placed into queue. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. Please don't speak about anything that's already been covered. We'll give a moment to let the callers have a chance to catch up. Staff, are we getting any calls?
Or not at this time.
We have one from Erin Hobart. Please state your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Erin Holbert. I currently live at 5908 Chowan. My husband and I have lived here for about 12 years. We love the neighborhood. We've got great friends that live down the street. And so I just wanted to call in and kind of say thanks for the Planning Commission meeting and adjusting to meet virtually. And thanks to Neil for putting a thoughtful plan together. And we're looking forward to improve our home and to add to the value of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers?
Sir, not at this
We have
time.
no more callers as of the moment.
Thank you.
I move to close the public hearing.
Seconds. Ms. Olson, could you do the roll, please?
Commissioner Douglas,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Shoot.
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. Well, and that brings it back to the Planning Commission. Do any commissioners have any comments or further questions about this matter? Commissioner Agnew.
So in one of the reports from the engineering department, it talks about 2 mitigations and then 1 suggested mitigation of having dry flood-proof on the new exterior garage wall. I heard that there were some accommodations being made for the flooding as a possibility. Are all 3 of these suggestions are what is incorporated into the actual plan?
I'm just pulling up the engineer's report here. I believe there was 2 conditions and the third one was the suggestion. Is that? So maybe the applicant can speak to whether or not they are going to include the suggested comment by the engineering department.
Can you state what the engineering department was saying?
Yes. Here. The suggested is the dry flood proof of the new exterior garage wall.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. And then I know that we also received comments from a neighbor electronically, specifically of concerns of the flooding coming onto their property. So it was the resident to the south that was most directly impacted. How did these accommodations, either the ones that were suggested and outlined by the engineering department or others being taken by the builder, mitigate the concern of that neighbor?
The applicant is proposing to grade a swale along the south side of that property, and so the drainage will continue to drain towards Chowan. So the engineering department has reviewed their grading plan that includes that swale, and so they believe that that will take care of the drainage and move it towards Chowan, towards the street.
Okay, thank you. I'm done with questions.
This plan will actually be an improvement over what is there currently as well, just to make that noted. So it should be an improvement for the neighbor as well.
Any commissioners have further comments or questions? Well, I have a question. Please jump in after me if you have others. One other item that the neighbor asked about was utilities into the backyard, utility access to the backyard. We had the hypothetical bobcat rule. Both setbacks on this, both side yard setbacks of this house will be about 5 feet. Will that be sufficient room without going into a neighbor's property to get stuff into the backyard?
There is a total of 11 feet between the proposed house and neighboring house. And roadways restrictions are 8.5 feet wide. So if it's allowed on the road, it will easily fit between the houses.
But will that be going onto the neighbor's property?
Yes, that would have to use 2 properties.
So, and this is thanks. So, my comment is, I'm generally concerned when you grandfather in older setbacks and give a variance on another setback, because the older setbacks were built in the context of, I think this is a planning commission comment. This isn't really a question or a discussion item. This is a planning commission discussion. The older setbacks were granted in the era of one-story houses, and I think one thing we're seeing as you walk around some of these neighborhoods where there have been a lot of remodels is you can see where 2-story houses have been built using the 1940s setbacks. They just look massive, and it doesn't look so bad when everybody in the neighborhood is bulking up and you've got big 2-story houses right next to 2-story houses. But when it's a 2-story house next to old 1-story houses, it looks uncomfortable, actually, just psychologically. So that is a concern, and it's something that I've been concerned about before. And that's just kind of my comments here. But I'd be interested in hearing any comments or questions from the other members of the Planning Commission.
If I could make one note, please. I know you're talking to the others, but the ramblers like this are actually becoming the minority in the neighborhood as well. This block in question, I would say probably 50% have been built up or actually new construction, and a lot of them are actually encroaching on the lot lines as well. And have you can see I have pictures of a lot of them. But they have large 3-car garages that take up pretty much the whole facade of the house. So this house, I think, will actually look minimalistic as opposed to a lot of the rebuilds or new constructions that have been put in on that exact block and street recently. So the house will not stand out. It'll actually be quite a bit smaller than some of the other neighboring houses.
Any other commissioners have questions or comments?
You can see one in the streetscape video.
Mr. Dyson, I'm sorry, I'll have to ask you to just, this is the commission.
Okay.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Does anyone have a motion?
I'll move approval of the variance subject to the conditions and finding outlined in the staff memo.
We have a second. We have a motion.
I'll second.
Any other further discussion? All right, Ms. Olson, if you could take a roll, please.
Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Nay. So that motion passes, and again, staff, that makes it a final motion, right? Final approval.
That is a final action, yes.
All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we go to the fifth and final public hearing matter for tonight's Planning Commission meeting. That brings us to a project that we looked at a couple years ago, and that is a 4532 France Avenue. They're asking to amend their final development plan. And City Community Development Director Harry T will speak to the staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This project is located up in the 44th in France neighborhood. It's just south of the Gateway Bank, south of Sunnyside Road on the west side of France. The site is currently zoned planned commercial district, similar to the properties to the north. There's a small office building to the south that's highlighted in orange. A couple of years ago, the site was rezoned, and the building that's on the screen was constructed. It's a 2,375 square foot retail and office building. As part of that approval, they received a parking stall variance. Based on the square footage of the building, 15 parking stalls were required, and the site plan, it was approved for a variance to construct 11 stalls. As part of that project, the lower level, which is this area here, was designated as storage space. It wasn't included in that parking calculation. One of the conditions was that that space remain storage. So the building has been up for a year or two, and they've found that the existing uses within the building, they're operating, they don't need even the 11 stalls that they have. So what they'd like to do is remodel that lower storage space into office space. So as part of that request, the city hired SPAC Consulting. Jonah Finkelstein from SPAC is on the call. Their conclusion was that by remodeling that lower level into office space, there still would be adequate parking. They're basically operating at about a 30% capacity, so they believe that that it can be supported. So the request before the Planning Commission is a parking stall variance from 18 spaces required, including that new square footage, to the 11 spaces that are provided on the site. They also need a revised final development plan to remodel that basement. As I mentioned, one of the conditions of approval was that that lower level be used for space. So this item will go before the City Council. So the action this evening is a recommendation by the Planning Commission. Primary issue are the findings for variance met. Staff believes that they are. Practical difficulty here is the small lot. There's no room to add additional parking. And we believe that the request is reasonable. Again, really based on that parking study that was done by SPAC. There's no changes proposed to the site plan or the building itself. So there would be no visual impact on the neighborhood. So with that, again, staff is recommending approval of the request subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your staff report. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And as mentioned, Mr. Finkelstein is also on the line.
Mr. Finkelstein, wait, hold on. I'm sorry, I don't know if you let you fast. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff? Mr. Finkelstein, would you like to, or Carrie, does the applicant speak, or does Mr. Finkelstein speak? Or?
If you have any questions for the traffic and parking consultant, he can share his findings or answer questions, whatever you'd like. The applicant is also here.
Why don't we go to parking and traffic first? Mr. Finkelstein, do you have a presentation, or you just want to answer questions? Or?
Yeah, I have a quick PowerPoint here. I will jump it up onto the screen. All right, can everybody see that? See the PowerPoint? No, all right. Yeah, so I guess first off, hello, commissioners and chair. Carrie really covered everything very well here, but again, just to quickly go over those numbers. My name is Joe and I work at SPAC Solutions. We completed the traffic study and parking analysis for this update. What we did is we looked at the previously approved site, compared the existing trip generation and parking generation of that site to what would be expected with the additional office space. So the figure that's shown here is showing the existing facility and the parking demands that would be expected there. And we determine these parking demands in two ways. So the blue columns that you see, those are actually the existing parking demands based off of traffic counts that we completed on a weekday and weekend. So we completed 24-hour traffic counts, counting all the cars that went in and out of that lot to figure out the maximum number of vehicles that were parked in that lot at a time. What we saw is that on the weekday, there was a maximum of 5 vehicles parked on site, and weekend, there was a maximum of 3 vehicles parked on site. The orange columns there are showing the ITE parking demand numbers, and that is the national standard for projecting parking demand based on land uses. And what we see here is that the ITE demand is fairly similar to what we measured in the field, with a parking demand of 6 vehicles during the weekday and 4 vehicles during the weekend. With the addition of the new office space, really what we see is 1 additional parked vehicle during the weekday and 1 additional parked vehicle in the weekend. So what we see here is that we bump up to 6. So the blue column is our existing parking demand plus that additional vehicle. That bumps up to 6 during the weekday and 4 during the weekend. And the ITE demand based on the ITE calculations alone bump up to 7 and 5 for the weekday and weekend. So what this is showing is that though the provided parking is below the city standard, we're still way above what we are seeing in the field and what we'd be expecting with this addition. And based on that, we have no parking concerns related to this addition. We also looked at the trip generation of the proposed development. So this is actually looking at how many vehicles would be entering and exiting that development throughout the day, and not necessarily how many vehicles are parked on site at a time. So the existing land use without the additional office space, we have 78 daily trips, 2 AM peak hour trips, and 5 PM peak hour trips. With the additional office space, that moves to 84 daily trips, 3 AM peak hour trips, and 6 PM peak hour trips. So overall, we're only seeing a total change of 6 more vehicles accessing that site daily, with 1 additional AM and PM peak hour trips. Based on the previous study, no study intersections were close to capacity. Everything was operating well within acceptable bounds, and based on that, we see no operational concerns that would arise with this additional space being used as office. And that is all I have there for that.
Thank you, Mr. Finkelstein. Do any members of the Planning Commission have any questions for the traffic parking study?
I have a question. So I noticed that you did your study on Thursday, March 12th and Saturday, March 14th. And I'm wondering, given that most of the stay in place orders, at least nationally, they talked about it on Friday the 13th. And
Yes.
even before that, people weren't moving around as much as they would have been. And I think it was already affecting restaurants and retail. So in your estimation, how much did that impact your parking analysis?
As we have those ITE forecasts as well, and I can, here, let me share this screen one more time. So again, this is showing I'm going to go back one more. So this is showing the existing numbers we collected. So again, the blue numbers are what we collected in the field, and the orange column is what ITE is projecting. So because we are so close here, what this is showing to us, to me, is that our parking numbers were likely not that impacted due to any of these upcoming stay-at-home orders. If these numbers were way off, if we saw parking demand in the field that was way lower than the ITE numbers, that is something that would then definitely come up in my mind.
Sheila, anything further?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions regarding parking and traffic? So I had just to follow up on the net new trips. You're basically saying you expect what, 6 additional, how many new trips? 5 additional new trips a day? 6?
Yeah, so what this table here is showing is that over the entire day, we'd expect to see 3 new trips entering the site and 3 new trips exiting the site. So that's the 6 daily trips we're seeing. And then the AM peak hour, we'd expect to see 1 new trip in related to that new office space. And then in the PM peak hour, 1 trip out. So 6 daily trips and then 1 new trip in the AM, 1 trip out in the PM peak hour.
Do these numbers differ by weekday versus weekend? For example, often I see retailers being busier on the weekend and office being busier during the week. Is that applicable here? And that could be a question for the applicant also.
Yes, that is something that we see. So the office land use is obviously going to have a lower parking generation, trip generation during the weekend than the weekday. So these 2 land uses are actually fairly complementary land uses. We have a retail land use that's going to see more use in the weekend, and then office that'll see more use in the weekday. So when you put those together, it does somewhat balance out. So there's going to be those office parking stalls that are used in the weekday are going to be open on the weekend, and then vice versa for retail.
Thanks. Do any other commissioners have questions regarding traffic or parking at this time? Well, with that said, Mr. Carl, you're on. You're the applicant. Would you like to make a presentation?
Not a presentation. I think Carrie covered it, and the SMAC team covered it very well. This was something when we were in front of you a couple years ago now. We had intended to finish off that lower level at that time. Obviously, the parking that was required based on the existing studies at that time certainly prohibited that, and so we felt like a lot of the assumptions that went in that parking model at that time were more aggressive than we would anticipate. With my wife and I both being in the retail business for collective 40-some years. She owned a boutique at the 50th and France area, and so had a pretty good sense of what general traffic patterns were like for a boutique type of retailer within the near vicinity. Since we've been open, as you've heard, utilization has come in much more in line to what we had expected to see, which was far lower than the original assumptions. And we are using about 30% on average traffic studies, which I think was substantiated in the most recent parking and traffic study. So we feel very comfortable in terms of that we'll have ample parking kind of throughout the week, both weekdays and weekends, as well as different hours of operations. And then in terms of the question that was earlier about just those days that the traffic study was done, I actually went back and pulled our reports for those days, and actually our traffic and our revenue on those days was actually in line with an average day of what we were seeing for the couple of weeks prior. So we didn't see any precipitous drop off with the maybe impending stay-at-home orders. So for what that's worth. And we live, we said, we've been a Guy's residents for 13 years. We live 6 blocks away from the location. So, you know, we've obviously believe in the community. We definitely invested in the community and are quite happy with the location and are excited for this opportunity.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Carl? I had a question, and that we don't typically get into uses, but just wanted to confirm. I mean, you're going to use this space as an office. How many people do you think will be using that office at any one time?
You know, that's a question I can't really answer right now. I mean, obviously, it's a fairly small square footage, so the footprint's pretty tiny, and so. But we obviously, without having approval to, rent the space out before, we've been approached a number of times about potential tenants, but have had, we basically tabled those conversations before they started. So I can't really answer that with great data.
Anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, we all know this is a public hearing. Members of the community can call in. For the final time, I will give the number to call in at 1-800-374-0221. Conference ID 5555207. Press *1 to be placed in the queue. Wait a moment and let our lines fill. If you do call in, please identify yourself and where you live, and you'll have up to 3 minutes. Staff, are we seeing anything?
We do not have anyone on the line right now, even listening to the call.
Readings aren't that good, I guess. Wait a moment. Any callers? All right, well.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Any seconds?
I'll second that.
Motion a second. Ms. Olson, could you do the roll, please?
Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
Aye. And that brings us back to the Planning Commission. Does anyone wish to say anything about this matter or ask any further questions?
I have a comment.
Hey, Jerry.
Okay. I thought the presentation, the facts, I mean, the review was very complete, very sound. And the other one is I thought the submittal message from Hope Melton was a very good summary of the outside observation about this project. I found that very persuasive too. But I thought the presentation by the property owner and the submittal by Hope, were very persuasive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions, discussion items?
I'll just comment that as we know, we looked at a parking issue not long ago, just a few weeks ago, regarding a potential restaurant at 4500 France Avenue. So just 2 doors down or so. And that was a little bit different issue because we were talking about a lot more space, but it does echo in the sense of, are we requiring more parking spaces than are actually needed, considering that more people Uber and use public transportation and hopefully walk? And are we just perpetuating a car mentality if we provide all the parking spaces? So I voted in that conversation regarding the restaurant to go forward because my issue was less about parking and more about traffic and safety. And I felt like we could mitigate concerns or issues with the traffic and safety. So as I look at this, traffic and safety are less of an issue because it doesn't, the exit here in this property doesn't route out to residential streets. It routes out to France. So traffic doesn't seem to be an issue. And safety doesn't seem to be an issue. The parking, I think in this case, it's been demonstrated that that particular space is probably overparked. And so I would not be concerned about approving this proposal. I guess the one thing, though, that I might consider is if I can ask the staff whether, or just to confirm, if we were to propose this and then a different type of retail organization went into this spot, does the variance go with the land or does it go with the owner of the retail building? Because a different type of retail building in that same spot may require more parking spaces. So if we've got the flexibility, depending on what type of retail, then I wouldn't be opposed to this proposal. But maybe staff can confirm that.
I think Carrie's having some issues with his audio. So he's logging off and he's calling back in, and hopefully that will help.
Because if I remember correctly, something similar came up in some past discussions regarding, if we make a variance for a business, whether it's, the variance stays with the particular business or whether it stays with the building. And I can't remember what the answer was, but maybe someone else does remember. So I'll just go on mute. Can just wait and answer that when Carrie comes back.
Yeah, let me see if I can help Carrie get back on, and then if not, I'll try to answer that as well.
Do any other commissioners, Sheila, do you have any other comments or questions? Do any other commissioners wish to have any comments or questions?
So I do. Oh.
Katie.
Okay, great. So I really like that we are taking data and revising data and revisiting this even just a couple of years later, now that we feel that we know more. I think that that's really great that we're able to say, we made a decision a couple of years ago, things have changed, we have different data now, and that we're revisiting this. So I thank everyone, and I'm glad that we're discussing this. I think that it's also important for us to keep track of this, keep this in our recent knowledge of the changes that can happen in parking. And as we're looking at, Sheila, you mentioned too, recent discussions about parking nearby. How can we continue to have this be at the forefront and influence other decisions that we're making in the same area that include parking? I think it's going to be really important. And I also, echoing Jerry's comment, really appreciated the outpouring of support that we got, not just from Hope Melton, but also from others in the community. It's clear that there is support for this. And I think that this has just been a really great demonstration of what the Planning Commission can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have, Lou, you had something.
Yeah, since this is advisory for the city council, I thought I'd bring up a few points. First of all, I just want to point out that when this originally came up a couple of years ago, I voted against this project because I thought it was kind of grossly overparked. And I think what we've seen here, at least from the study so far, is that in fact it is grossly overparked. And it's sort of this, unfortunately, this sort of little building in the middle of this, sea of asphalt. So, so I think pretty clearly, I think that, asking for a variance here, is a good thing and a welcome thing. And if, we look at some of the pictures that have been going around since, because of this whole COVID-19 thing, I don't know if other commissioners have seen pictures from, say, Los Angeles or New York City, where it's so clear now. you can see the city, and it's just the haze is gone because there's so many fewer people driving than there used to be. So, from a climate change perspective, I mean, clearly anything we can do to discourage people from driving is a good thing, and having less parking discourages people from driving, especially people who live in the neighborhood who could walk here. But I would like to point out also that, it's one thing to remove infrastructure for cars, but we can't just do that and think that magically people are going to walk. I mean, because I live in this neighborhood, and I actually bank at the bank next door, and I visited this store and I bought something from it. It's a lovely store. I love it. But if you, for example, took transit and were on the 6 bus and stopped at Sunnyside in France, right now you couldn't get directly to this store because because of the construction of the other building that we were just talking about for parking, has taken away a lane of traffic and has taken away the sidewalk. And so I think the city needs to think about how we treat pedestrians in terms of comparison to how we treat motorists, and the space we allocate for pedestrians versus the space we allocate for motorists. And again, if we want to make a more walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly city, then we have to consider how people get around if they're not in a car. So let's say this wasn't overparked. Let's say that we were just at the limit of what this parking was, and we wanted to give a variance here. Well, to encourage people to walk here, you couldn't have the sidewalk closed on the same side of the street, right? So people now, if they get off the bus stop at Sunnyside, they have to cross Sunnyside, then they have to cross France Avenue, then they have to walk down France Avenue, cross 45th Street, walk another block to 46th Street, cross there, and then double back to this building. And that's all because to save 3 parking spots on the other side of the street. And so it's a county road, so it's something the county has to worry about, but it's something the city approves also. So I think it's important that the city council think about this when we decide, how we're allocating space on our streets, how we're building sidewalks, and whether we can just say, oh, we're just going to have less parking, or put it another way, more density, which we're doing in various parts of the city, without having more space for pedestrians and cyclists and transit users. So something I've mentioned before is, well, stepping back for a second. So you look at something like this, and there's a benefit to the business to say that they are, pro-urbanism, and they want to have people, they don't need as much parking spaces because people can walk and bike and take transit here. But they're basically getting free rentable space out of this, which wasn't allowed before. And we have a PAX fund, the Pedestrian Cyclist Fund, which could always use more money. And I think the city ought to consider doing something like having a buyout program, kind of like we had for affordable housing, where if you want to reduce your parking usage by X spaces, then you have to contribute something to the PAX fund. But in any case, it seems like, cities and developers and landowners, should be all contributing into this rather than having just the taxpayers do this. So I think this is perfectly reasonable thing to variance to request. But I think we need to think long term. We as a city need to think long term in terms of, okay, how do we make this work? How do we have fewer parking spaces and also allow more people to walk? Because right now it's easier for me to drive to the bank than it is to walk there, and I live less than a mile away. Because we've seen around the country how dangerous it is for pedestrians and cyclists to just cross the street, even at a crosswalk. Deaths are up dramatically, and so people aren't going to walk. I don't walk there. I don't bike to the bank because it's not safe. I'm not going to take my life in my hands on France Avenue. So I think it's imperative that we look at this longer term and have a bigger plan for when we say we're not going to have as much parking or not as many lanes or whatever, what we do to make sure that people actually can walk there rather than, because what may happen, we're making it harder to park there, for example, so I'm not going to drive, well, then I can't walk there because it's dangerous. Well, then nobody goes to this business, right? It doesn't help anybody. So anyway, that's something I just think the city council really needs to think about.
Thank you. Do you have anything, is that everything, or anything about the variance itself, or?
Carrie's back on now. If you guys have the question, if we want to go back to Sheila's question.
Yeah, Carrie, Sheila was asking, if the variance is granted, does it run with the property or does it run with the business? So that if the business changes, the variance goes away, or is the variance conditioned on the usage or anything like that?
The variance does run with the land for an office use. So if one office user moved out, another could move in. If they turned that into retail space, then they would have to come back through this same process again. But the office use would run with the land.
Sheila, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments on this matter? Jimmy, you have something?
Yeah, this is Jimmy. Yeah. Just want to make a quick comment, as Sheila and I were part of the small area plan as well as Lou, just as co-chairs. Just in general, like the last proposal is kind of on the fence when we saw this a couple of years ago, but in general, reducing the parking here matches what we want to see in that area in general. So like Lou mentioned the last time, is like when we start building this infrastructure around parking, we're going backwards. So I think this is going the right direction by reducing it. Even though it's helping them out after what was accepted, this is the right direction just in general. So I support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions on this matter?
This is Joanne. Just real quick, we keep discussing the parking and we keep seeing that Edina, that our requirements are high. So remind me, Carrie, maybe are we going to consider reviewing our parking requirements? Is that for the Planning Commission, or is that something that the Transportation Commission has to look at first? And it could be tied into, I know we're also trying, promoting looking at parking districts, but I just think that we keep having these variances, and clearly I think our requirement for parking are high.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It would be a Planning Commission study. I'm thinking about our work plan, and I don't recall if if the parking ordinance was part of that. I'd have to look that one up and get back to you, but it is something that would be worthy for us to take a look at.
Thank you.
Ian, you're muted.
Excuse me. Are there any other comments or questions about this variance request? Thank you. I have a comment, which is, we saw there was good public discussion on this matter, both pro and con, and many of the reasons I think, particularly the pros have been summarized pretty well by the commissioners on this call. One concern that has come up, and it was also mentioned, is the context of the Lorient project we reviewed a few weeks ago. And I see a difference between this project and the Lorient project in terms of posture. I see a few differences, actually, but one big procedural difference, and perhaps some factual differences. Procedurally, I saw the Lorient as a project that was approved and has not been built yet. And then before completing construction, there was a request to materially change the parking requirements. This project, on the other hand, has been built, and there's real world evidence about whether or not this change would actually have created an impact outside of the property. And the real world evidence that we've seen says it doesn't. And I think when you have real world evidence, as Commissioner Agnew would refer to it as data, I think that's very important and very good to have. I mean, it's good to do your studies based on what you know and expect of the world, but it's wonderful when you actually have real data that you can apply. And we have data about this site. Also, I think fact-wise that the change is pretty small. I mean, I've run facilities for different companies with offices around the country, including areas that are more commuter-based and areas that are more multimodal, more car-based, and areas that are more pedestrian, bike, mass transit. And I expect the number of users to be driven by this, quote unquote driven, to be fairly small. You can probably count the number of additional cars on the high end on one hand. I think that's what Mr. Finkelstein showed in his studies at any one time. So I think the impact is very minimal on the site itself, and I think based on the real world evidence that we have, it suggests very likely, extremely likely, that the impact on the surrounding community off the site itself will be almost none. So with that said, I'm comfortable with this proposal, and I would vote in favor of it. But don't let that be the final word. Do any other commissioners have questions or comments? And are there any motions?
I move to approve the variance and to recommend the City Council for the change to the site plan review, subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
A second.
Motion a second. Are there any further discussions? Ms. Olson, the fifth, no, more than fifth, maybe 25th. Could you do a roll vote?
Yes. Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube. Commissioner Berube. Commissioner Berube, do you want to raise your hand for aye?
Sorry, it wasn't connecting, but now I'm connected. I think something happened. But yes, aye. Thank you.
Commissioner Miranda. Commissioner Miranda, you're on mute. Okay, Commissioner Miranda, do thumbs up for aye and thumbs down for nay. Thank you. Chair Nemerov.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes the matter, and well, and that concludes our 5 public hearings for this evening. We still have a few other of our traditional agenda matters, but our public hearings are over. Thanks everyone for participating. The next item on our agenda is reports and recommendations. I don't know if we necessarily have any formal. After this, we have chair and member comments. For reports and recommendations, however, I mean, do we have any? Does anyone believe they have a report or recommendation? Because to me, there's a chair member comment, and Commissioner Miranda, I was going to ask if you could comment on the TDM meeting you had with the city council last week.
Yeah, I think my audio is back. It was disconnected for a minute. Excuse me. Chairman Nemerov and I, along with the transportation commissioners who are on the committee, met with the city council in a work session to discuss the TDM plan. And basically the feedback that we got was, it was the council members seemed very cautious about doing too much too quickly. And they had a lot of questions. And basically, I think that, we wanted to move forward, kind of looking at this, maybe with staff coming up with a more detailed plan, and then having a joint session between transportation and planning to discuss this in a little more detail. I think it was the council. They had questions, for example, about cities like we discussed a lot about Bloomington, and we discussed a lot about Eden Prairie, and they had questions about Minnetonka, which we hadn't really discussed. And so yeah, I think they wanted to give it to staff to flesh out a little more detail on this, and then potentially have us work with the Transportation Commission.
Lou, what plan was this? I think I missed that.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, we're talking about the TDM plan, as you called it, the TDM, Transportation Demand Management. So sorry, I should have given an introduction. So yeah, so this is about not about boring things. It's about managing transportation, managing congestion on city roads, and what ways the city can use to control how much car traffic there is, for example, by encouraging or having a requirement, for example, for commercial buildings of a certain size or with a certain number of parking spaces to have a plan for how they might mitigate the traffic that it might induce. And so having bicycle facilities, having the ability to move, I don't know if anybody can hear me because all I see is little circles going around on my screen. So I'm just assuming people can hear me.
You're doing great.
Transit passes or discounted transit passes to employees, for example, or if it's for residents, for people who live there. And so what we discussed is having a 2-tiered plan modeled on Bloomington's plan, where smaller projects have a lighter load in terms of determining or transportation demand, and larger projects having a bigger requirement. So there was a lot of discussion about what that means for the city, what it means for developers, much money they have to invest in this. You know, is there a checklist when it's over? How do we know that it was successfully completed? That sort of thing.
Thanks, Lou. Does anyone have any comments or questions or for that? Actually, questions, or does anyone else have any chair or member comments? Jimmy.
Yeah, I do. You know, whenever Lou starts going off about pedestrians and cyclists, it just gets me thinking and all passionate too. So, I've been thinking a lot, as the weather is getting better and seeing everyone outside, walking place to place. I mentioned it during that last planning commission meeting, just about Vernon and, these plans that we put in these frameworks for like the short and midterm to start addressing some of these pedestrian safety issues. And, time, it creeps by, but then goes really fast. And I think we don't realize how much we haven't done in a timely manner to back up the word and, the plan that we're vocalizing we believe in. And so, I was doing some looking into like our Living Streets plan, which was like adopted in 2015 already, like 5 years ago. And just going to different cities as well as different cities, even around this metro area, like I still don't know if there, is a section of our streets that have been redone that I would say Edina is the local leader in the state, or a regional leader with how we protect pedestrians as well as like afford a nice, experience for all ages, all users. And so I don't know if, this is more of a comment, but, a lot of times we're talking about, I'm getting an echo, but we're talking about projects that interface a lot, are right on these streets that are key for getting people to and fro. Just like tonight, we're talking about the one right on France. And with that sidewalk right on France and traffic going by, it's kind of dangerous and people aren't going to bike there or walk there. And I don't know what we can start doing as a commission or as a city, but I'd just love to, see that more on the radar, see more projects where it's such a shining, clear example of us leading as a city. And so I don't know if it's worth looking into what other cities do by the time, like, hey, this street is decided to get reconstructed. And when it goes into the hands of engineering, what type of resident input could get brought into that, especially if it's like a bigger county road, that's not really the city's to control. I don't know where we as a city can try to step in and voice more, urgency to these matters, as well as steering them toward what we'd want to see in our community. But I don't know if any other people thought of that. I'm sure Lou has, but it's really just a long comment and rant, but I'm getting frustrated.
Thanks, Jimmy. Anyone else have any comments? I have two things. First of all, as you know, we discussed last week. We're going to remove the work session from our next meeting, April 29th. We're working in a new way. But we are going to reschedule that hopefully in May. I am concerned about, while we're doing this, I am concerned about canceling too many work sessions, because I don't know if you're like me, everything is getting booked in August. We're going to have the world's most exhausting August. And I know that there's things like what Lou and Jimmy are bringing up and other things on our work plan. And I'm concerned that if we push off our work sessions until we can meet in person, that we're going to find ourselves in a lot of stress at the end of the year. So I'm hopeful that we can have our next, we won't have the one on the end of April, but I'm hopeful that we can keep our others and make good use of them. The second, related to that, you can give me feedback to that if you want. Obviously, the reason I want to do that is because I know if we don't, we're going to start panicking as we get towards the end of the year because we haven't addressed a lot of issues that we wanted to spend more time on. Second, tonight is our first meeting like this to do it. We're all going to get better. I think staff's done a wonderful job to equip us, but if anyone has any ideas of how to do the meetings better, I've already thought of a few things that I can do better, but if anyone has any feedback, please share it privately or with staff about how we can make these meetings more effective. So with that, does anyone else have any other comments? That takes us to staff comments. Staff?
Nothing from staff this evening, other than we should plan on the May 27th work session, whether we have to do it virtually like this or in person. My guess is it will be virtually, but let's plan on doing that.
My guess is, this is totally my guess, I don't have a line into the governor or anyone like that. This is totally my guess, is that even if stay-at-home orders are removed, that there's going to be a lot of public concern about limiting in-person contact. So I think, Carrie, that we might be in the oddest situation if the stay-at-home order is removed and people have concern about participating in person. That's when we're really going to have to scramble and figure out what the rules are. Just tossing that out there. So, anyone else? Anything else? Otherwise, we're through the agenda. I thought it was a very productive meeting. As Aretha Franklin said in 1985. Just remember who's zooming who. But I'll call for, if there's anything else, call for adjournment. Is there a motion?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Do we have to do a roll vote on this one? Or can we just say aye? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone, and stay well. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.